Hey, Brian, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be back. Hopefully, I don't repeat myself too much because I don't remember what we talked about in the last session.
A lot of about XML, and
Yes, I know.
the secret department at Microsoft, as I remember.
Yeah, yeah. That was interesting. That was interesting because the conversation sort of was. It ended up being focused on XML. It was cool, but that was a big part of my life at the time,
Yeah,
for sure.
but now you're
Um,
back from conferences, right? So is a conference season started?
yeah. Here in Las Vegas this year. We're talking about this year, right?
Yeah.
There's been several conferences here in Las Vegas. Travel being what it is, folks are still not going to events as much as they used to. But I'm fortunate in the sense that there's several events here in Las Vegas that I can go to. So I've been to Spring One
Hmm.
this year already, and IBM Tech Exchange
Hmm.
and Cloud World
Hmm.
and
Oracle Cloud World.
Oracle Cloud World. Yes,
Hmm.
managed to have something to do at each one. And yeah, that was fun. That was a lot of
Okay.
fun.
So,
Yeah.
which was the biggest?
Oh, definitely Cloud World.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think Spring One had about 8,000. IBM Tech Exchange had about 2,200. And then Cloud World was well over 10,000. The claim was 13,000. I didn't keep count. So it was big, though. It was big. It was all over the convention center and quite crowded.
But I would say not as big as it was before in San Francisco, right? So it was even bigger.
Yes, yeah, I remember. I'm sure you remember as well those days when Cloud World and JavaOne were
Yeah.
adjacent, and they used to. I mean, the whole city, the entire city, all the hotel rooms were sold out well in advance, and it was quite a trick to even get into the conference. I can't remember what the numbers were. I think they were 40,000 or
Yeah,
something. I
exactly.
mean,
So what I
really
remember
big
between
numbers.
30 and 50,000, something like this. It was just crazy.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Java One alone, I would say, before Oracle came, were 10K attendees.
yeah,
And in the
yeah,
year 2000, I remember, it
yeah.
was as big that the Moscone was too small. So they were officially under 30,000 because the problem at 30,000, there was some problem with fire department. So it
Wow.
was unofficially under 30,000, but actually it was more than 30,000 attendees or 35,000, something incredible.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and then and the Oracle world, I think, was this BA world, then was Oracle world, and the
Yeah.
Java one, and
It
everything
was
together was
for a
still
while they
huge.
called it Oracle Open World.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. And then they had Java One. Yeah. As
Was it
a
something for
adjacent.
Java one at the Oracle world, or was it still Oracle world now?
There were some tracks and uh Shar Chandar and some other folks did their best to make it to make sure that Java was represented, but there was no official uh event for
Okay.
Java at Cloud World. Yeah.
So what you
Unfortunately.
did at the conferences? What do you talked or just attended or?
I do both. So yeah, speak when I can, and then I got to talk, for example, at Cloud World about WebLogic and on Azure, running on Azure
Okay.
Kubernetes service, and that was a good talk. We set it up. We had a live demo. A lot of people there. Not to be critical, everyone has their own style, but a lot of the sessions that I attended at Cloud World were slides only. Everyone had their PowerPoint slides and they go through, but ours was almost all demo, just because that's what we do.
Hmm.
And people really appreciated it. It was well received. So
Hmm.
yeah, but
Um,
uh,
was it more about the integration between Azure and WebLogic? I can imagine, right?
yes, yeah. So
So what you did in particular? So I'm really interested. So because I'm a BA technical director from the year 2003, and BA
okay,
technical director was a program, and I don't know how I became BA technical director, but it was something with asking many questions, and they then found me, and I had some sessions about BA, and I was actually a huge fanboy, BA fanboy. The early versions were great, and
Yeah.
the recent versions are, I don't know the most recent one, but after 8 it
Yeah.
became larger and bigger and harder to manage than the earlier BA. I don't know whether you know, but the first BA WebLogic server was basically a jar. So there were 2 jars, and you can
Yeah.
it started very quickly back then. So I really
Yeah.
like that.
I don't
So
remember. I mean, I know Open Liberty and WebSphere before
mhm.
that was um, based on Apache uh, app server. Was this the same thing for BEA or?
No,
Uh,
Not Apache. What There was an IBM HTTP server which was basically Apache, and IBM
yeah.
sold this
Yeah.
as a commercial. But
Yeah.
the WebSphere,
Yeah.
you could run WebSphere without the Apache because the
Hmm.
WebSphere was a servlet container.
Right. Right.
And
Right. Yeah.
maybe this is what I don't know. The WebSphere servlet container was based on Tomcat, which is Jakarta Apache project. So Tomcat is like the servlet engine,
That's
and the
correct.
Apache web server is just a web server. And
Yeah.
it's a little bit more complicated because in the early Java day, there was a plugin to Apache. I think it was called JServe. So you could actually run servlets in Apache as well, but this is not what usually happened, in the recent years. And
Right.
the WebSphere Classic was huge, and the
Yeah.
WebSphere Liberty is tiny. Is very fast and small and nice. So the WebSphere Liberty or Open Liberty, what we use
Yeah.
mostly in projects. So
Yeah.
what I'm interested in right now, what you
Yeah.
did with WebLogic and Azure. So if you remember what you know,
Oh yeah. So I can go through it. Um, so basically, as you pointed out, WebLogic became complicated, very
mhm,
complex to sort of run, which it's not a bad thing. It's just the way it is. It had to be managed. And so what IBM and Microsoft in a partnership developed something called the WebLogic operator. So it's an operator for Azure. And basically what this is a piece
wait
of
a
code.
second. Why
Yeah.
IBM and Microsoft developed something for Oracle?
I'm sorry, not. I'm getting them mixed up. I was sorry. Just before this, I was talking to somebody about IBM Liberty, and I screwed up. Oh boy, Oracle.
It's like
And,
this is a great that IBM actually contributes code to Oracle. This was
yeah,
actually
wow. Well,
this was
thanks,
like
thanks, IBM.
I missed Oracle world and everything changed.
Thank you for catching that. No, I meant Oracle. Oracle and Microsoft put together this thing called the Oracle operator,
Mhm.
basically for WebLogic. I'm not using the exact terms. Sorry to Ed Burns. I know he has a specific term he's supposed to use, but that's what I call it. The Oracle operator for WebLogic is basically a way of managing deployments and making sure that you have some guardrails when you're actually deploying a WebLogic server on AKS or on virtual machines as well. So Azure Kubernetes Service or virtual machines. And it just makes it easier. Aside from the operator itself, we created this marketplace image that uses the operator. And I should say we, Ed Burns, Reza Rahman, and some other folks at Microsoft created that. And basically what it is you can go to the marketplace. So search Azure Marketplace and you choose the WebLogic on AKS option, WebLogic on Azure Kubernetes Service option.
Mhm.
When you click on that, there's a form to fill out, and you fill in various things like the resource group that you want to put it in. I'm pulling this in off the top of my head from our presentation, but the resource group you want to put it in, the Kubernetes underlying virtual machine you want to choose, and that can be an ARM or x86 virtual machine. How you want to do load balancing. So we
Mhm.
have a default load balancer built in, or you can set up a manual load balancer or no load balancer. You can also have the option of deploying an application.
And this is
Uh,
the HTTP load balancer, right? So application load, application level load balancer, right?
yes, yeah. We have something called Application Gateway, which is like a default load balancer you can use, and it's literally like one click and it's scalable. But the other one is a load balancer that you create yourself, an HTTP load balancer. And you specify the users and the apps in specific clusters that you're going to use on Kubernetes and the size of those clusters. There's all kinds of detailed information you can get into. But the bottom line is, and as I mentioned before, you can deploy your own app as long as it's on Azure storage. And then
what is on
there's a
Azure
couple
storage?
of things like
The WebLogic is the installable of WebLogic is on Azure storage, or the container, or what do you mean?
no, the WebLogic itself, you have to have an Oracle account because you're going to pull it from the container registry at Oracle.
Okay.
So there's an Oracle container registry. As long as you have an Oracle account, you can grab several things. So you have to, there's some licenses you have to choose. So you have to go into the container registry and literally click on agreeing to a license before it will let you run it. But yeah, it's there's a lot of things that are quite complicated to set up a WebLogic server on AKS for the first time. And the operator itself sort of takes away all that. Not all of it.
What you mentioned Azure storage. So what is stored in the Azure storage? Is the sessions or
so the application that you want to deploy. So you're going to deploy the WebLogic server from the Oracle Container Registry, and then you deploy the application from Azure Storage.
So the ER or WAR or whatever you have, right? This is what you mean,
right? Yeah, ER or WAR. Yes, yeah.
Oh, this is interesting. So it means the WebLogic itself runs on Kubernetes on Docker containers, but the application is not shipped as a Docker container. It ships as a zip.
It's shipped as a WAR file.
Yeah, zip basically.
Yeah, and then it gets containerized basically automatically and put into a container registry. Azure has its own container registry, so similar to Docker
ACR.
Hub. In fact,
Azure Container Registry.
ACR, Azure Container Registry. It's a private registry by default, and it's based on the same code for Docker Hub. So a lot of Docker commands like Docker build and others will work really well. One of my favorite commands is ACR build. And so if you have some code locally on your local machine, let's say you've cloned a GitHub repo and you're connected to an Azure Container Registry, you can use the Azure CLI and type ACR build. And what it'll do is it'll take the code from your local machine, including a Docker container, a Docker file if it's there. It'll put it into what we call a hosted agent in the cloud. And it'll build that and test it based on your Docker file. And it will actually, if everything runs correctly and there's no errors, it will create a new Azure Container Registry entry in the repository for you.
It's almost like a GitHub Actions story. Similar.
Yeah, similar. Yeah, but it's just one command. So instead of having to say Docker build, and then Docker push, it does everything, and it doesn't take up any horsepower on your local machine. So if you have a machine that might take a long time to build that and test the container, it'll actually do all of that in the hosted agent on the cloud.
But
so
there's
cool.
a free plan, but in one point of time I would have to pay for it, I guess, right? Because building can be really expensive.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah. But
which is fair, but just but this is one option. But you can still build on your local machine, right? This is just like
yes.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about Azure Container Registry, the hosted agent is actually included in the price. So the hosted agent doesn't cost you any extra to run.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's a virtual machine.
So I'm just paying for the ACR.
Yeah, exactly.
So back to the WebLogic. So if what you said is interesting. That I put to the WAR to Azure Storage, and you creating container from the WAR with WebLogic, I guess, right? Or you are deploying to WebLogic. You know that?
Yes. So we're deploying to WebLogic, but it still is containerized because it's a WebLogic server. So that each pod has to contain that image, that application, the WAR EAR file. But it also, it puts the WebLogic server as part of that as well. So there's when you look in
because what I did before is I had a WebLogic base image, and then I inherited from the base image and deployed the WAR. And what happened then? I got my WebLogic with the WAR image. And then I could start it several times on Docker, basically, without Kubernetes. This is what I did a few years ago. I get more than 5 years, I guess. So I think you do either this, or what you could also do is optional. You could start, the 3 WebLogics or 4, depending on your cluster, and deploy to each of the WebLogic on the fly the WAR. But I think what you're doing, you are creating one image and starting 4 times, or
Yes.
This is, I think,
Yeah.
this is what
And
happens.
that's
also
what's
when
in the
yeah.
Yeah, that's what's in the container registry. So it's containerized with the app and the instructions for WebLogic to use it as a node.
So what I understood, you fill a form, what you would like to have, the CPU's RAM or whatever, or maybe even easier, say, okay, big, small, or large, very large, and then the Kubernetes orchestrator is orchestrator. How it's called? Kubernetes orchestrator, right?
What is it? It's basically all. So when you're talking about Azure Kubernetes Service, everything in the management plane is managed by Kubernetes Service.
But how it's called, the extension of Kubernetes? I think orchestrator, right? If you build your own Kubernetes schema,
isn't it? etcd is the
etcd is the configuration, but
configuration
in Kubernetes there's a way to create your own Kubernetes extension, like that the WebLogic is starting in the right order. And you mentioned it's operator, not orchestrator. Kubernetes operator, this is the name.
Well, it's the WebLogic operator. So the Kubernetes, the Kubernetes part of it is for it's written for Kubernetes, and it uses. I'm trying to remember the key components in the management plane for Kubernetes, but I'm drawing a blank right now. That's one of the problems.
But the operator, WebLogic operator for Kubernetes, I think would be the right name. So what it does, it starts and stops. This is like, so what it usually is that you can have your own Kubernetes commands, to control WebLogic, which makes it nicer. And I think, so you mentioned it already, this was the name, Kubernetes operator for WebLogic. And you extended AKS with WebLogic DSL, domain-specific language almost, to control that. Okay, and what I wanted to know is, what interests me, was it the session, is there a huge interest still in WebLogic? Was it like well attended, or, there were like just 2 Microsoft people in the room?
Well, I can tell you there were about 60 people in the room, but honestly, it wasn't. It was like a theater. We didn't know that until we got there, but it was like a theater inside of a executive briefing center. So this was exclusively for partners of Oracle. And so we had about 60 people scattered around the room, but some of them just came in for lunch and things like that. It wasn't like a traditional meeting room, but I'm guessing we had probably about 20, 30 people who were watching this session.
And is it good? Or I had no idea what the expectation is,
I was good, yeah. I mean, we focused on the Azure part of it because everyone there knew WebLogic well. So, I sort of did a show of hands at the beginning. It was myself and Ed Burns, by the way. So Ed Burns was there as well. And did a show of hands just to ask, how many people here are WebLogic administrators? How many people have deployed WebLogic before? And everybody said yes. And I said, okay, how many people worked with Azure and Kubernetes before? Not many hands. So I'll be like, okay, we're going to focus on that part. So that's what we.
So what happened then? I can imagine what you did on Spring 1, right? So what was there?
Spring 1, I didn't have any talks. Some of my colleagues did. So Mark Heckler and Rory Preddy and Asser Selvar Singh had talks. Unfortunately, I didn't have any for this one.
About what?
They mostly talked about, we have a product that has been built in partnership with VMware and Microsoft called Azure Spring Apps. And it's a way of managing your applications using something similar to Cloud Foundry, if you're familiar with that. It's very much VMware Tanzu management, and it's basically Spring Cloud packaged in a slightly different way so it's specific for Azure and has a lot of features that you can use to add into Azure.
Was it well attended?
I think so. Yeah, I didn't attend every session, but I think it was.
Okay.
I was mostly working in the booth and speaking to people and catching up. So that was nice. It was nice, nice break for me. I generally am under pressure to deliver a workshop and a session and be here and there, and I didn't have that responsibility of this particular event. So yeah.
Okay, the last one was IBM. What is it called?
Tech Exchange.
Tech Exchange, exactly.
Yes.
So, what was this about? Open Liberty?
Yes, for us it was. I mean, IBM Tech Exchange is a very broad event, everything to do with developers. So they have, actually, it's more. So they have an event in the spring called IBM Think, and that's, as far as I can tell, that's sort of more for developers. Whereas the IBM Tech Exchange would be more like system administrators and decision makers and partners and things like that. That was the impression I got. I didn't have that confirmed anywhere, but that was the impression I got. At Microsoft, we have a similar setup where in the spring we have Build, and that's specifically for developers. And then in the fall, coming up in November, we have Ignite, which is specifically for system administrators, what we call IT pros and people who work with the administration and deployment and management of systems versus developers.
Okay. So, and which topics you had? So you attended as a speaker at the Tech Exchange conference?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was.
Go ahead. So what was your topic?
So Reza Rahman and myself were representative of our group at Microsoft, and it was deploying. We had a workshop on deploying Open Liberty on AKS. Yeah. So once again, we're highlighting AKS, but this time with Open Liberty, and we based it on some documents that we have in Microsoft Learn and deploying out of there. So
it's similar architecture as opposed to WebLogic, right?
It is. There's an operator similar to that. So there's a IBM operator for WebSphere Liberty.
Are even the commands similar? So if I know knowledgeable with WebLogic, could I apply the same command or similar commands to deploy Open Liberty?
Not really. No, it doesn't really obfuscate the or virtualize the environment itself. It just makes it easier to do the deployment. So that's what the operator does. And then once it's deployed, what the operator does is just when it's deploying, it enforces security rules and things like that to make sure that you're securely connecting to databases and that you're connecting to databases.
So what I understood now, you don't have to fire up the Kubernetes commands. They are hidden behind the app, the form, right?
Yes.
This is what I meant, because the Kubernetes commands are similar in both cases.
Yeah, you use the Kubernetes commands you use for get pods and all the standard.
This is clear, but I think if you have an operator, you can introduce your own commands. I don't know, like application server cluster up or application server. So you can have a CRDs. I think the name is like custom resource definition, and with the custom resource definition, you can introduce your own Kubernetes commands. And I think this have to be similar in both cases. And of course, you cannot, you use low-level WebLogic commands, to deploy to WebSphere. So this won't work. But okay. And was it?
Yes. No, that's you're correct. Yeah, I was a little confused with the Kubernetes operator. The IBM operator and the Oracle operator are different. They're just highlighted for deployment, but you used standard kubectl commands for managing Kubernetes.
Okay.
And then inside of WebLogic, you can you have the capability of running of looking at the console and working with that as well.
Okay.
But both have similar concepts, WebLogic and Liberty, but they're very different.
No, it was interesting in the Azure part. Whether the Azure part is similar for both. So like the architecture of the Azure cloud is similar for both cases. I guess so, because in both cases AKS, and in both cases you have your own operator, right?
Right.
What was it well attended, this session?
Not really. It was the end of the day.
Okay.
And we just had a few attendees, but it was still worthwhile. They were good customers of Microsoft, and we were able to help them with some kind of one-on-one consulting.
Okay. No,
but yeah, the problem was not the topic, as far as I understood it. It was the fact that it was scheduled at 5 p.m. on the day. There's a big party that night, and so we would have finished about 6:30, and the party started at 7, and just not a lot of people came. We had more registrations than we had people show up.
So
yeah,
I remember the JavaOne, the very last session, there was almost empty, and it was really, really interesting. And I actually spent the entire session. I wait the last session, and then I have to go to the airport. But there were.
Yeah.
I even remember the sessions. This was from. Yeah, but regardless, this is not very thankful to have.
No.
To have the last session of the day, because the people are going out during the session, just leaving. Yeah.
Exactly. You've been there. Yeah, it's not necessarily a reflection on the presenter or the topic. It's just logistics.
Now, what is your impression of the conferences? So it's like they are significantly smaller than before the pandemic, I guess, right?
Yeah, they are. There used to be a different atmosphere. I got to say, of all three, IBM put on the best show. I got to say.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Oracle was good. I thought they had a good organization, but in terms of the getting a lot of information, IBM, and it might be because it was just smaller. It was a focused small event. Spring One. I don't want to be too critical about them. I think they did a fine job with what they were given, but they had sort of a show within a show. So Spring One was part of VMware Explore, and I think attendees were somewhat confused at what we had in some cases. So. Yeah, that was kind of difficult.
So the 8K attendees were actually VMware attendees or Spring One?
Yeah, there was 8,000. I think there was about 1,200 Spring One attendees.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned that. But yes,
a similar story to early Oracle World in JavaOne, right? As they merged them, no one knew. Actually, what I remember. Do you remember in San Francisco there were even arrows, on the pavement, right? Left Oracle World, right to JavaOne, and because everyone was confused to what is what, and then it merged, and now now it seems like there's only Java track on Oracle World, because last year there was JavaOne actually, right? And
they had a separate event for JavaOne.
Was it on some official statement or something? Was it like Java related keynote, or what was the
at this particular event? No, they had a community day. Shar Chandar and some other folks did a great job of managing that. And part of that was some Java events, including the Java 21 launch. And that was cool. But there was no big keynote.
Well attended, the community day, or?
I think so. Yeah. I wasn't there the whole time, but
okay.
It looks like it was. So.
Because the problem is, as I attended Oracle World in JavaOne, I was sometimes at breakfast and with other people, and we had a chat, and they were they attended the conference for complete different reasons. I remember a chat with a gentleman. He was like he was a manager of a law firm basically. And he had no idea what Java is right now, and it was the same conference. So there was like a wild mix of business people and Java developers. So I can imagine if you have an Oracle open world, it would be actually interesting to know what is the percentage of Java developers who attended open world, because if I would ask, is there any Java content at open world? Because 5 years ago in open world there was at most maybe some MySQL and Oracle database sessions.
Yeah.
But the Java sessions were always at JavaOne. And if there's a Java session, at the Oracle world, it was usually, Java in Oracle database, something like this. So always, Oracle product related. And the Java one was more about Java. So if there is a track at open world, it's interesting how many Java developers will really attend open world to get Java content, right? This is the interesting part.
I think there was a very small number, if at all. I mean, there was a few folks there. There was Sharat Chander. There was Pratik Patel from Atlanta Jug, DevNexus fame. Andres Almore was there. And some other folks from Azul. Azul had a booth. And there were some Java booths, including Microsoft. We had a section for WebLogic specifically. But yeah, I don't think there was any real promotion. There was no CFP process for Java talks. There was nothing like that. There were just a few sort of promotional talks. My talk was, a partnership talk. And that was kind of a rarity, actually. But yeah, there wasn't any real focus on that. In fact, that same week, the JCP meetings were taking place in New York City. So the Java community process meetings took place at the Java as part of the Java New York SIG, which was celebrating an anniversary as well. I believe 25 years. So to give you an idea of how important it was to the Java world, the JCP was not at Cloud World or in Las Vegas. It was in New York at the same time. So,
do you know Mohammed Taman?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice guy. So you mentioned JCP. So JCP party and the entire JCP event was always co-located with JavaOne. And
that was always my favorite, not my favorite, but my favorite fun thing to do at JavaOne. Yeah.
Yeah, and I attended once, and it was always a nice bar, with a nice city view, right? So it was always on top. Yeah. And but once I had to deliver a session, so Birds of Feather, and it collided with the event. And what I didn't knew, I won a JCP award, but I forgot what it was. I still have a kind of a trophy at home, and something with JSR or JCP related. But the cool story is I couldn't attend because I had to deliver a Bits of Feather session. This is why I know they were always collocated. But the Mohammed Taman picked it for me, so there were pictures with him. It was my trophy, and he gave me at the party. So this is why I remember that JCP was always collocated with JavaOne. So it's interesting to know there's now in New York, and there's only one community event in New York. Interesting.
The Java Special Interest Group, yes. So Java SIG, they existed before Java User Group.
With Frank Grieco, he was a big fame in Java User Group, New York. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great guy. Yeah. So if you can imagine, all the folks who were involved in JCP were in New York and not in Cloud World. So it wasn't a Java event.
What's I actually don't care that much, but what I don't understand from Oracle perspective, that actually the JavaOne was the most popular conference until they started to rename it, right? So the JavaOne was a great brand, and what I observed is, for instance, there were many many attendees from corporate America, for bigger companies. I saw them only at JavaOne, nowhere else, and they were allowed to go to JavaOne, but no other conferences. So if they renamed, the JavaOne to something different, my impression was I never saw them again. So I remember, some, because I always have interactions with the attendees after the talk. So we had a chat, and it's okay. Glad to see you again after 1 year, and what you're doing, and so. And most of the people are gone then, because they didn't got the approval for the travel and whatever, because JavaOne was a big, big conference and everything else was smaller than that. And also for me, JavaOne was still something special. And I know destroying the brand is a pity, right? Because they could just keep the name and even have a track or a building at Oracle World and just call it JavaOne. So this is what I never understood. And what they said at the beginning, yeah, but they have different languages. I say, yeah, but if you have a conference with all possible language, who is supposed to attend it, right? Because if I'm a Java developer and there are one Java talk, one Python talk, one Rust talk, I'm okay, then you get crazy. We were overloaded with content anyway. So if there's if you quadruple the amount of tracks, you get, this is just too much. But this is just my opinion. I never understood it. But I guess, I don't know, some political decisions who no one understands, right? So this is. But what my observation is now, you mentioned Ed Burns and Riza Rahman. They're the people actually who work for WebLogic or were close to WebLogic back then, right? And they are very knowledgeable about the stuff. And now it seems like their work on Microsoft is highly appreciated. So what's for me funny and interesting,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what goes on in the meetings. I'm sure if we had some insights, that would be helpful. But it doesn't make sense down at our level, does it?
It wouldn't be helpful. I think I was in sometimes in such meetings you cannot even summarize what happens, right? So this is like this is absolutely not logical what sometimes comes out of that. Not even Java related in other companies is just crazy. So it happens and no one can do something against that, right? But what interests me right now. So last time, we had a chat about XML and Java, and now you're working for Microsoft. So what is your role, or what you are doing there?
So I was trying to remember where we left off, and so basically I joined Microsoft in 2012, and I'll just start there in case if there's a repeat, it's okay. So 2012, I joined Microsoft, and I was hired as part of a group called MS Open Tech.
Exactly. This was the secret by Steve Ballmer, right? So exactly.
Yeah. Steve Ballmer actually created it, yes. And a guy named Somar Samasagan was basically in charge of it. And he was in charge of it inside of Microsoft. And then they hired a gentleman named Jean Pauli, who was involved with the XML project from the beginning. He was one of the players. And he was hired to be sort of the CEO of this company, this MS Open Tech. And then he hired a whole bunch of developers. I was one of the first 10 developers that were hired on the team. And I was hired for my Java skills. I'd actually interviewed with Microsoft back in the day when they were trying to do XML. Not trying, they were succeeding very well in doing XML conversions of all of their Office products. So everything in Office, if you open a PowerPoint, a PPTX or XLSX for Excel or DocX for Doc for Word docs, if you open those, if you change that file extension to a zip file and open it, it's a compressed file with a bunch of XML in it. People don't know that.
I can imagine a beautiful, formatted, well-formed XML with beautiful tag names, right?
Actually, yeah, pretty good. It wasn't bad, believe it or not. And what happens is the runtime then becomes the sort of a manager of the XML. And that's all written in C, C++. But yeah, basically they converted everything to XML. And I went through a round of interviews. I thought I did pretty good, but apparently I was not selected. So unfortunately, then a couple of years later, the same guy who interviewed me with the XML said, "Hey, Jean Pauli is putting together a new team. Are you interested in working for us?" At the time, I was working for some startups, and I just finished working for Deloitte, working for this big sort of a consulting / product that they had for drug trials. And I was like, yeah, I'd like to get into something more general, and I would love to be part of the cloud. So This is open source, the clouds. It sounded like a great deal. I went up, I interviewed, I met Jean Pally, I met who would be my boss, and the guy who interviewed me before. His name was Doug Mayhew. And he's now retired. He was part of Microsoft for many years and then moved to Google and then retired. But
was at Microsoft for many years, then went quickly to Google and retired, right? So this was the story.
After a few years, yes. After a few years.
Just kidding, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, the interview went really well, and they basically hired me on the spot, and they needed people right away. So I'm based in Las Vegas, always have been. And, they said, well, you're going to have to spend 2 or 3 weeks a month in Redmond, at least at the beginning. And I did. Ended up spending 2-3 weeks a month.
And you like Redmond?
I do. It's an amazing place. I mean, it's very tech oriented. So I live in Las Vegas. It's the desert. I love the sunshine here and the dry air and stuff like that. And it's a nice balance. So I go up there, I get some moisture and it's just a different mix of people too, obviously. You have very different conversations. I go to the sauna a lot. So I go work out and I have a swim and then I go to the sauna. And so the sauna conversations in Vegas are very different from the sauna conversations.
That is what I can imagine, right?
Here in Vegas, you can have you can't talk about XML. Sort of, all they say is, oh, Bill Gates, sort of thing. And in Seattle, it's like, oh, XML, yeah, I was involved with the original, interest group on this project or whatever. And you meet a lot more interesting people. Anyway, it's good. So I like Redmond. I like Redmond for the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And it's like a college campus when you go to Microsoft. I mean, it really is. Mm-hmm. It's all the buildings are devoted to Microsoft. They have cafeterias, and I had my own office in one of the buildings. Mm-hmm. In fact, one of the things about Microsoft life back then, at least, they tend to like to move you every 8 months or so from building to building. Oh. So we were constantly migrating from building to building, and which worked for me because I wasn't there all the time anyway. So okay. I had a suitcase in a hotel in Redmond and a box in an office, and went back and forth. But yeah, that was a great experience. So MS Open Deck itself, I digress. MS Open Deck itself was built for managing open source and not just promoting open source offerings that we have to the public, but also evangelizing open source inside of Microsoft. And that was the hardest part. As you can imagine, folks were really nervous about talking about Java to the public. Mm-hmm. And frankly, we have some PR firms who tend to scare people as well. So, they're like, okay, unless you use our services, you're going to get in trouble if you talk to the public. And so there's always that sort of atmosphere as well.
You mean you PR people you hire are scary?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
They can be. They scare you. And that's their job to do so. I mean, it really can... it's a lot. We're talking about a lot of money at stake for the cloud, mm-hmm. for open source offerings, and if you say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, in public, one wrong sentence can cost a whole division or a lot of money, and so they have I respect their
mm-hmm.
job, but at the same time, if you're talking about open source and the open source community, things are different than they are in the sort of corporate PR world. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to sort of mix the two. But yeah, no, we went out. I remember talking to my first Java user group in Seattle. And that was a great experience. The organizers were very kind and gave us a nice spot at the REI, which is it's a local in the US. It's a outfitter for outdoor equipment and stuff, and they had a big meeting room in the back. Okay. A beautiful location in downtown Seattle. Anyway, When my boss found out that I'm going to speak at the Java user group, I'm like, hey, I'm going to do a good thing. I'm going to go talk at a Java user group for the first time ever for Microsoft. And he was like, what? Oh no, have you run this by PR? So we had to get PR, and we literally had to get lawyers to look at what our messaging was. And we had, what did they call it? They had some sort of sheet with questions and answers that you should give if you get asked tough questions, because there was still that history with Microsoft and Java and all that stuff. So they were worried about that. But they didn't need to worry, man. We went there and everyone was like, wow, this is great. We had no idea Microsoft was working on this stuff. And, we really benefited from
Which year was it?
2013. So I joined in November 2012. And I spoke, I think, in like the spring of 2013.
So you were the very first, it was the very first official Microsoft talk about Java.
Yes, I'd say so. Well, they probably had others, but this was the first like post lawsuits talk for sure. They really hadn't had any since the before days. And they were
What was the title, you remember? What was the title of the talk, roughly?
Oh, God. I think it was just... because we had some Eclipse. I don't remember the exact title, but what I can remember what I showed.
Yeah.
Which we had some Eclipse and IntelliJ plugins that we had built to make it easy to deploy to Azure.
Okay.
So back then it was called Windows Azure. Interestingly, we managed to get them to fix that. It was deployed to Windows Azure on Eclipse and IntelliJ. I think something like that. And basically all it was a plugin that you could do. You could log into your Azure account and you could deploy to App Service or to Azure, or you could copy something to Azure Storage. It was very simple back then. But it was a Eclipse plugin. And from there we went on to work with Jenkins. And we actually worked directly with KK and some other folks at the Jenkins Foundation, and we got some funding so they could run their build and deployment process on Azure. And that was for like 3 years they did that. I also worked with just random, what seemed like random things, but they were tied to Microsoft, and Java, which is MongoDB. We had a long, strong partnership with MongoDB. We still do. And because MongoDB was so popular with Java developers, also MySQL. So MySQL is popular as well. So we worked with them. I remember.
And you were still the same department, this Open Tech department we're talking about, right?
Yes. And the real, you know what? I mean, we can say this now, but the real reason why they had a separate company was for intellectual property concerns. So I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the details, but they were worried that if we started contributing to open source projects, that we could somehow compromise our intellectual property at Microsoft. So they made it a separate company. And then later what they did is they created a company called Microsoft Intellectual Property. Okay. And they basically put it all there. And by the way, Google and I think probably Amazon do the same thing. So they have their own intellectual property companies. So the company itself that is Microsoft that hires all these people doesn't actually have ownership technically of the intellectual property inside those companies. It's owned by a third party. So that basically shields them from any legal issues when it comes to open source. So when that happened, we were able to be absorbed into the main open source teams at Microsoft.
Oh, okay.
And this group was formed called the Open Source Programs Office. And basically they were there to teach people how to work with open source communities, make sure they have the right licensing for whatever they're working on, make sure that they're not exposing themselves to any vulnerabilities in the open source software and things like that. So it's a good program. I didn't join that part. I joined the program management office as a program manager for Java.
And this is still what was your role until now?
Yes, yeah. So actually, at the time, no, it changed since then. But At the time, I was program manager for Java and Node because they didn't think Java was a big enough opportunity to be dedicated to one person. With like, oh, you can handle Java and Node. I'm like, all right. I kind of neglected Node, to be honest, but I mostly worked with Java and worked in the Java community. And basically, my job at that point was to go out to different events. And I think that's might be what Antonio was talking about in your podcast. I was at different events, and we were basically there to get information about what we should be building at Microsoft to better serve the Java community in our cloud. So that's what we did. We went out and we at some events we gave away T-shirts. Some events we just asked people to fill out a survey. But we collected thousands of survey responses and things like that, and brought them back. I should mention one thing about Microsoft too. At the time, they had a whole bunch of people called evangelists, and I was one of those evangelists. And there was an executive decision made at Microsoft that they were going to get rid of all the evangelists, or they're going to at least eliminate the evangelist role at Microsoft. Some people didn't like the title, which is understandable, and some people didn't like just the role. They just thought that program managers could do the role themselves better than evangelists could. Okay. So basically, in my case, the people in the open source programs office became program managers, and I became a program manager as well. But I just kind of did the same thing I used to do with evangelism, and that was kind of interesting. Unfortunately, there were some people who left because of that as well. We lost some good folks to that decision. But the role was still needed. See, here's what happened. And this is interesting. I think it's very important to record this. They said, program managers know the products better. So program managers, for those of you unfamiliar in big corporate offices and big corporate world, so the program managers are basically like the CEO of a product. Okay. So you're supposed to be out there getting feedback from customers and basically guiding the direction of the product that you're working on, the product or service that you're working on. So what happened was program managers, because they're tied to a certain product or service, they would go out and try to do the evangelist role. And all they would do is sell the product or service that they're supposed to sell.
And then you want to get accepted to conferences, right? With such.
Thank you. Yes, that's exactly what happened. So they went out, and some of them, straight up, they some of them basically said, tried to make their abstracts vague, but then they were really, it was a sales pitch, and customers and attendees of conferences who paid to be there didn't like it much, and that's not really hard to predict, is it? It's so basically that was like 2015, and then around 2017, a guy named Jeff Sandquist, who used to work at Twitter, he was working at Twitter at the time, came back to some of the executives. He used to work at Microsoft. He went to Twitter. It came back to some of the Microsoft executives and said, "Hey guys, I got this great idea. I want to create a team of people who represent the community. And we're going to call them cloud advocates, not evangelists, because we don't like that term. We're going to call them cloud advocates." So basically, the cloud advocacy team was born. And as soon as I heard about this, I chased down Jeff Sandquist and bothered him until he gave me a position on the team. I was one of the first advocates on the team, focused on Java. So I was 100% focused on Java. As a cloud advocate, so back to the life I liked. And personally, it was nice because it was a remote role as well, so I didn't have to be in the office all the time. I was in the office from 2012 to basically 2016, 2-3 weeks a month. So I could work remotely, and I was free to go to events again, and we had travel budget and all kinds of cool stuff. So
so you are still a cloud advocate for Java.
I'm still a cloud advocate. I was, like I said, one of the first folks hired in 2017. And here in 2023, I am working as an advocate. And it's been a great run, and I've learned so much about the cloud. And I've kept up with my Java skills as well. So it's a perfect job for me. I love going to events and speaking and even being on the road.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't like it. I actually really like it, and so it's been a great role.
What were the topics for this year? What you were? So we heard about WebLogic, the OpenLiberty or WebSphere Liberty, and Spring apps on App Service, right? So what else? So what are the topics related to Java and Azure? So you are associated with.
You know what? It's interesting. So those conferences you mentioned, Spring One, Cloud World, and Tech Exchange for IBM, all of their talk submissions were in January and February, right? So the CFP was January, February, and guess what happened in March? ChatGPT started showing up on your local news program. And so it completely shifted everything. So since then, even now, even at these events, I try and squeeze a little bit of AI in, ChatGPT and other things, because it's so important. I mean, it's really making a difference. It's kind of unfortunate that this big trend followed the previous big trend, which was crypto and NFTs. So there's like, if people aren't working with it, if they're just sort of pundits that are looking at this, they're going, oh yeah, the next big thing, it's just going to be another fad like cryptos and NFTs, but it's not. It really isn't. It's this one is different. Anyone who's working with it is really seeing the potential, and it really is amazing. I mean, so ChatGPT specifically, I was amazed that it could write code.
But what you can do on Azure with Java and ChatGPT? Any topics, with Java AI related?
I'll tell you. So not just ChatGPT, but I've sort of evolved. I don't go out. I have a membership. I have a subscription for ChatGPT, but I don't use it all that much. So anymore, because I have Copilot now. So I have GitHub Copilot and Copilot Chat. And by the way, these work in IntelliJ or Visual Studio Code. And Copilot Chat is amazing. They just literally last week announced a beta of Copilot Chat last Thursday. And I had a talk Thursday night, Friday morning at DevOps Ukraine. And I scrambled all day Thursday. It was the last day of Cloud World. I scrambled to get my new talk covering chat because it's amazing. So what you can do with it, for example, is if you're in your code, it's aware of any open tabs you have in your code. It's aware of the files in the file system, but not the code inside those unless they're in an open tab. And a few other things. You can literally go and there's several slash commands. And I don't know if anyone remembers slash commands. If they're old enough out there, like me, to remember slash commands in different software like Excel and Lotus 123 and Clipper and things like that. These were all run by slash commands. You hit the slash and it would pop up with a menu with things you could do. Well, Copilot sort of brought that back. So you hit the slash and you get these commands. You can do explain, which is slash explain. It'll explain the code. You can do, this is the really powerful one, slash fix. It will actually propose. I did this in my demo. I selected something. I purposely mistyped a word in Spring. There's a lot of managers in Spring, right? And so I'm constantly typing manger, and I don't notice, and it's hard to see. So I purposely changed one of my classes to manger, and I did slash fix, and it's like, yeah. Did you want me to change this manager before I fix it?
Is this a part of Copilot X, the chat?
Yes. So, Copilot X, it's part of the main Copilot now. So if you have VS Code and you have Copilot, definitely download the Copilot Chat extension
Copilot
as well.
Chat, okay.
Yeah. So /fix. So there's explain, fix. What are the other ones? Doc. So do /doc, and it will actually add documentation to whatever context you're in at that second.
Java doc, you mean?
No, it's going to be a description.
Okay.
It's not Java doc. Yeah. That would be cool if you had a /Java doc, but
yeah, it would be. I mean, the description is more important because the parameters and the return value. But actually, ChatGPT could also do the parameters return values because they are easier than the description.
It's true. It's true. It's just not. It's not necessarily specifically designed for Java yet.
Yeah.
So.
But you are the program manager for Java, so you have to do something about it, right?
Yes. Well, advocate. But yes,
delete Node.js. Delete Node.js. Refocus the resources on Java, and here we go, right?
There we go. Yeah, that's what we need to do. Anyway, there's several commands you can use. You can also do things like hit Control-I or Command-I on a Mac, and it pops up an interactive chat wherever you are in the code. So the chat can be on the side of the screen, but you can also pop up an interactive chat right there. So Control-I. One other thing I forgot to mention for /fix, the /fix command.
Yeah.
There can be when I did that on the feature manager that I had, it found the error for my typo in the error in the variables, but it also proposed 7 other solutions for the code I had.
Okay.
So this is really important. It's good and bad, right? Because you need to know which of those 7 solutions A will work and B are the best one.
This is also my impression. So I would say I used Copilot a lot, and so it suggests Java code, but I just look at the code as okay, this is 80% what I need, and then I will adjust it a bit. So you are hyper productive with AI if you know what they are doing, right? Because if you just accept what happens, I would say after 3 clicks, no one has an idea what actually inside, right? So I would say
it's completely broken if you just accept the first suggestion of it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I would say you have to be skilled. You have to know to be focused. You have to be able to read code fast. The suggestion and decide is it worth or should I type it. But then it's great. Yeah. But I think many there are opinions like it is great for juniors. I'm not that convinced because if you are a junior developer. Let's say junior developer, if I would try a new language which I have no idea, so Python I only know a little, right? So if Copilot will suggest me Python code, what I can do, I can just leave the window open and try it somewhere else, and if I understand it, put it back to the code. So this is how I will learn. Yeah. But if you're under pressure, I will maybe accept it, and then it's over because after 3 acceptance, I have no idea what I did. So. I think what maybe will happen is you don't have to write boring code if you are already a coder, but if you don't know what you are doing, I think you will still have to learn. And maybe Copilot could help you with learning, but you have to be really determined to say, okay, I would really like to code, and I will use Copilot as help. But this is my opinion about that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%. I agree. They say it's for, they don't really say who's they, but.
The popular opinion, what I heard, I read some articles, so they say, okay, it is like, how it's called, it democratizes, the software development because everyone can contribute code. But this is because everyone can click a button, do something. Yeah. But this is also true for MDA days. I don't know whether you remember model-driven architecture. Everyone could draw a box and then generate, the entire enterprise application. But then it was over. It was deployable and this worked. But any change in the code required you to understand the code, and this is not different in Copilot, right?
100%. Now, I think the main people, the people that get the most benefit from this, are senior developers. Yeah. Because, as a senior developer, I know what I need, but I don't want, sometimes building the base classes is just grunt work, So if you can get an assistant to write the base classes and and then you just put it all together, Great. Well, that's what, now you don't need that assistant. Copilot is the assistant.
Yeah.
So, and junior developers, they'll get some benefit from the explain command, for example, the one I mentioned earlier, where it gives you a big, long explanation. It gives you a ridiculously long explanation in some cases of what this code does, and then what I find is I use it for, like the other day, not for Java. I don't necessarily use it for Java, but the other day I had a big long bash script, right? And I needed a PowerShell version of that to run in a certain environment. So I just said, create this bash script, but in PowerShell. And it did. And it worked the first try. So that's the kind of thing, I just love to have an assistant to do that stuff. And now I do.
What you would cool experiment, you go to your chat window and say, explain. Then you copy over the explanation, put to ChatGPT and say, write Java code, and
yes.
see how different the ideas are.
You can do that. Now, I find, here's the thing. That's what I have a problem with is the code that gets generated is it's either really boilerplate. Like if it's really simple, like you want something like, give me a class that returns the circumference of a circle or something, it'll do that. And it works perfectly. But if you say, give me a application that manages inventory, it's just going to print it. It's going to work on it. It's going to do it, but it'll be garbage. It'll just be absolute garbage because it just doesn't have the context that you need for your solution.
But even if it suggests code and I accept the code, almost always I can shorten the code and make it a little bit more readable, which is okay. But what was really ChatGPT and all the AI, generative AI, good is getting new ideas, because sometimes I'm surprised. It's like, okay, this is interesting actually. What is suggested here? I will investigate a little bit more. So it's like this is great to learn new things. So
now the one caveat there is the code base is from 2022. So anything like it won't know anything about Java 21 or any latest.
The enterprises don't know anything about Java 17 or 11 sometimes. So this is like this is 2022 is almost too much, right? So
something beyond Java EE. Where is I googled it. I can't find Java EE. What happened?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what else? So this chat is great, but there was this semantic kernel. You are aware of it? So this is more interesting because it seems like you have an Java API to AI, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So instead of having to write prompts and convert those prompts, but semantic kernel is more than just connecting to AI or connecting to ChatGPT or OpenAI specifically. It also allows you to bring in your own data. Right. Mm-hmm. So you can bring in your own data and it uses vector indexing to manage that data, whether it's images or, PDFs or other stuff that you might have that you don't necessarily want to have shared with the world, but you still want to have access for your team. You know what I mean? And that's, it's a very common use case where it's like, okay, we want to use our stuff in ChatGPT, but we don't want everyone to have access to it. So now we can create our own large language models, basically using our own data that is accessible by semantic kernel. And when it does a search, it kind of decides where it should look for the data. And it brings in, well, that's a wrong way to put it. It kind of decides what's the best source for the query. Mm-hmm. And it combines your local data with ChatGPT results. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of cool. And there's a lot of tweaking that you can do to make semantic kernel, use your data or ChatGPT more, things like that. But yeah, it's a very interesting technology. Still a very early stages, but very cool.
Can we try it already? Just so on GitHub, there's some.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we're working on I'm currently working on a demo with Bruno Borges and John Oliver and a few other champions that you may know on building a demo that we're going to show at Ignite in November using Java.
This is on the System Administrator Conference, right?
Yeah.
So no one will
Yeah.
listen to it. They will just ask you how to convert a shell script to from
Yeah,
corn
probably.
shell to Z
No,
shell. This is the interest.
there's still a few folks who
Okay,
dabble in
we
development
have to
there.
wait to
So we will.
build conference. But I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So there was okay. So there was the chat semantic kernel. What
Yeah.
else? I mean, not AI, but what were the topics from this year? So we had to know the and all the or Java Asia topics.
Yeah. That's. I mean, honestly, the AI is going to just sort of overshadow everything for the next, at least the next year or two, until it sort of gets woven into the fabric of everyday life. But I think that's really the big one. At Microsoft, they're sort of reorienting a lot of teams to be AI focused, including ours in a lot of ways as advocates. But there are other developments. I'm trying to think of some of the other developers. We're sort of focusing more on Kubernetes service, virtual machines, and app service these days because that's what customers are looking for. So
Interesting that it's still Kubernetes because in my projects we going from Kubernetes away mostly because of complexity on
really,
costs. Yeah, on
okay,
Azure, for instance, what we do for Fresh project, we use Azure Functions, a big deal, also
okay,
in enterprises because
yeah,
I mean we don't like to spend time with the infrastructure. We did it the entire Java E and Jakarta E time, and now if you go to
yeah,
cloud, just push the logic and so Azure Functions are great and even the
yeah.
premium version. And
That's
then
true.
Azure App Service because I think I always confuse there's Azure App Service and Azure Container Apps. I think
Yeah. So container apps is a containerized. It's like you're borrowing a Kubernetes pod from someone else.
exactly. Then this is Container Apps is the it was in preview last year, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then Azure Container Apps is the way to go because it's like Kubernetes but simpler. But even if there is Kubernetes behind the
Yes.
scenes, we are absolutely not interested in running Kubernetes. And
Yeah.
so I would say on Azure, if I did, the stack would be so the first choice would be Azure Functions with Cosmos DB, and
Yeah.
the second choice would be Container Web Apps with Cosmos DB or Azure Storage, and Kubernetes would be the
Interesting.
very last choice because what we I really see in larger enterprises just Kubernetes is too complex and too expensive, and it only
Yeah.
matters for lift and shift. If you have on-premise applications
Yeah.
they just pick the applications and then put it to the cloud and then complain it's too expensive actually. And
Yeah.
my opinion or my opinion what actually we do is we ignore the standards in the cloud and pick the simplest possible service you can get from the cloud provider. And even if because it's not about portability in my eyes, it's more about the switching costs. If my project is very portable, but I had to invest a lot to understand the portability and create the portability, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter, if you spend millions and in one time you can maybe migrate between Azure and AWS, but you spend the entire time to build the abstractions. Or you spend nothing, you
Yeah.
build, you pick the simplest possible service, and then if you would like to move from Azure to AWS, you say, okay, the migration is, I have just business Java code, and I have to run the Java business code again on AWS. What would be the simplest possible service on AWS? And if you take a look at the services, there are similar services on Azure and AWS. So this is my strategy, Just we tried to abstract from products all the time, right? So we had we try to abstract from Oracle for the databases, whatever. And the truth is, usually, all the databases outlive the applications. So we abstracted from the databases, but they lived longer than the application, so it was not worth. And this is also my observation in the cloud. And actually, the entire this year, this was my job actually, or lots of my contracts is to help clients with the costs and complexity. And the solution to the problem was just pick proprietary cloud services which are simple and nice, and forget the standards, and it worked perfectly.
Huh. Okay. Well, that's an interesting feedback. I mean, we're getting a lot of interest and growth in Kubernetes in our Azure Kubernetes service, and maybe that's because it's managed by us versus managing your own Kubernetes on
Yeah,
VMs.
but look,
and Azure Containers.
if I have, for instance, Quarkus app, right? So Quarkus I use all the time, MicroProfile. Quarkus doesn't care whether it runs on Azure Function. It's the same code as on Kubernetes. So if I have the code, I would try Azure Function first. I pay as you go for an enterprise. I don't have to pay nothing until I reach a threshold. For Kubernetes, I have to pay all the time. I have to patch the pods. I have to think about load balancers and everything. And Azure Functions, I'm done. So it is like why I should there is no advantage of using Kubernetes. This is exactly the same as Angular, right? So people are doing Angular and they can do Angular, but there's actually no advantage of using a framework over just using the standard. So it's the same here. And so for instance, the funny story, right? It was a highly secure project, and we had to have an audit, right? And I got asked, what about the infrastructure? So it has to be audited. It's like, we don't have anything. So why? Where is the operating system? So serverless, no operating system. And if you run Azure Function, there is not even Java, right? You just say, I would like to have Java, I think 17, right? 17 now.
Yeah.
And Microsoft patches Java for me. So there's a huge advantage. In Kubernetes, I have the problem that I have to create still, the Docker file, the super image. I have to care about that the super image is safe. I don't like to do it. I did it 10 years ago. It was fine, but now 2023, why we should do the same stuff? So I would say Kubernetes is no more existing in all my projects in 2023. And there were some Kubernetes projects, and we migrated away because of various reasons. Usually, our costs, updatability, and portability, even because of the Docker images, right? So we have to, portability. I always said it. Portability. I never had a problem, to pronounce portability. And
but you know what? When we were saying portability just now,
portability,
the automatic
portability.
echo
It's very simple word.
cancellation.
Portability is no problem at all.
It's funny when we were repeating it just now. I saw the echo cancellation feature pop up on your podcast streaming service.
Oh, very good. So portability is
Thanks
echo.
for echoing.
Echoing. This was fun. Yeah.
See, that was hilarious. So I that's an interesting take. I'll have to see. I mean, Microsoft should know these things, right? So they need
The
to
problem
see
is the problem is not the Microsoft. The problem are companies, and there are many architects who believe that Kubernetes is cloud native. If something is not Kubernetes, it is not cloud native, and also they are afraid of vendor locking, cloud vendor locking. If they are not doing Kubernetes, they are locked to Azure. So okay. But if you go, to Azure Container Apps, and I have my Docker file, I mean, if Azure says no, I go to AWS. It's the same Docker file. Why I'm locked, right? I mean, I need just container orchestrator. Maybe I have to set up the slices in Microsoft in 10th of a CPU and on AWS in a CPUs. But this is my login, right? And I already logged in because of identity management is so different in both clouds, and also the networking is different, of course. So this is my login, but not Kubernetes. And if I talk to managers, this happens all the time, and I show them the Azure pricing calculator with Azure functional Kubernetes. There was no single case where you had to do Kubernetes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, this is just a feedback because this is I don't know if we're speaking money about our costs, there is no Kubernetes actually in the project. And the last thing, you are Java developer. Actually, we can have complete different chat, right? The huge advantage of serverless is every developer can get an production or an environment identical to production for zero costs. It is impossible with Kubernetes because you will have to create a Kubernetes cluster per developer. Huge waste of energy, costs, and everything. But if you have an Azure function, every developer can have an Azure function. And if you call it 1,000 times a day, it just slips between, There's no waste of money, resources, no energy. Everything is green.
that's what I mean, it's not exactly the same, but I find that Azure Container Apps is great for dev test.
Yeah.
Because, you're working in a pod, it's Kubernetes. It's not 100% the environment you're going to deploy into, but it's reasonable. You can have a reasonable expectation that when you deploy, it'll work as expected. So that's nice. But yeah, it's interesting what you say. So Microsoft actually started a marketing campaign about a year ago, which I had mixed feelings about, called "Do More with Less."
Yeah.
Basically, which is what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're doing more with less.
Yeah.
So that's great. I mean, at the time, do more with less was really based on, just making things more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not sure that they recommended lowering your cloud costs. They probably did, but I'm just being mean there. But
they do actually. Both cloud providers have to, because
Yeah, they don't want a whole bunch of customers who say the cloud's too expensive.
Exactly.
That's they don't want.
And the next thing which happens, this happens next year in Europe at least. There's a law coming out where you have to prove how much CO2 you spent in the entire chain. Mm-hmm. And if you go serverless, you get actually on the invoice, you can see this was my CO2 footprint. But if you do not serverless, you have no idea, and it runs the entire time. So it is very bad for marketing to have a bare metal machine run 24/7. So it's if you serverless, you can see, okay, I have that many transactions and I generated that much gigabyte seconds, and this generated so much CO2, and problem solved. So I would say starting a project right now which is not serverless is not problematic, but why? Right? So do you have a reason not to do it? Yeah. Because the serverless is what we wanted to have for years with Java EE, right? We have a war, we put the war to production, and whatever happens here, I don't care. I just invoke, my endpoint, I'm happy. Right. And this is exactly, your Azure function or your Azure Container Apps or whatever comes and goes on demand, right?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, that's. I've been working as well. There's another angle in this. That I've been working with a company called Ampere. Mm-hmm. And they have ARM64 virtual machines, and those virtual machines can run Kubernetes on Azure as well. And it's about a 30%. If you use Java in combination with Ampere, it's about a 30 or more percent reduction in your processing, and that means 30% or more power reduction, and just makes it a little more sustainable. So I've been a big proponent of Ampere. People are a little confused because I'm supposed to be a Java guy, but I'm talking about chips.
No, ARM is great.
It all ties together.
Perfect for that. Yeah. But if you could even combine Ampere with Azure functions.
Yes. You can't right now, I don't think.
No, but in one point of time it will, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and you would probably choose your underlying infrastructure.
It's also homework for you. Maybe you know it already. There was one paper about Java energy efficiency in the cloud. And the interesting part is Java is number 4. So this is C, C++, Ada, I think Rust, and Java, something like this. So Rust is before Java, then was Ada, was number 2, and C++ was number 1, as I remember. And Python was 35 times worse than Java. So and this in one point of time it becomes obvious. So this is interesting. So actually Java is perfect for the cloud as a green language.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So you are in the right spot, cloud advocate. Now with serverless and Java, you are completely green, right?
Absolutely, 100%. No, not exactly 100%, but we're getting there. And we're also doing a lot of solar installations. Yeah. And here in Nevada, solar is such a big thing.
This is what I think, right? In Las Vegas, you can have as many solar as you like, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, and if you drive out, where Hoover Dam is, it's a famous dam all over the world. It's where, they had the original lake, still mostly there. I don't know if mostly, but it's been shrinking. But it powers all of Las Vegas and a lot of California too. Using turbine power from the dam. And they've been building up capacity in the olden days, they would have done it by adding more turbines, but now they're adding solar power around the dam. And the reason for that is because all the transmission lines are already there.
Yeah.
So you can use the same grid,
actually a cool idea,
but generate electrical power. So if you drive, it's very interesting. You drive out, you can drive for 10, 20 miles and you're in the middle of solar panels the whole way, all around the valley there. So it's pretty amazing. And of course the sun and everything is good for that.
The last observation about ChatGPT and similar. So what's a little bit odd, right? All these startups or whatever, at the end of the day, they are just submitting a string and receiving a string, right? So this is the API, what everyone gets. And the secret sauce is to playing with the parameters to get the right thing, which is reliable.
Yeah.
And do some, filtering in between. So that's all, right?
Yeah.
This is like a absolute low tech, what you did at CGI days, actually, at the beginning. So it's like, 3 parameters, and this is what you get out, and then you build application around that. Because I think there is no startup in the world, who can create, OpenAI model from scratch. So what they can do is, I think this is prompt engineering, mostly what happens behind the scenes. I don't even with fine-tuning of the model takes a big role for smaller companies. I'm sure Microsoft is doing that. But that's interesting, right? So actually, that you are just chatting via API with something, getting results back, and you hope that the result is reliable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's several, and by the way, Java's not part of that yet, really, behind the scenes. I mean, there's an API to talk to it, but I think personally, this came up at Spring 1. I was talking to someone about how would Java benefit AI? And I was thinking, okay, so first of all, there's the creation of the data, actually ingesting the data into a large language model. That can be done with multi-threads and faster. So if there's any kind of ETL that needs to be done on the data, so and actually clean up the data before it gets into the large language model, well, there's already Java tools for that. And the reason why they're Java tools is because they're fast. So you could use that for, basically loading data into your large language model and then building the parameters. Once again, there's a lot of processing that takes place to build those parameters and make the connections between the parameters. And so that could probably benefit from Java code as well. It's a typical startup scenario, right? So they write something in Node or Python or something, and then they get to a certain level of capacity, and they say, wow, okay, so we need something more powerful to actually process this. What do we do? And Java often comes up in those situations and is the solution to choose. So, I could see big opportunities for Java inside of the large language model / AI world in the future as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian, where people can find you on the internet? So give you some, pointers to your existence, virtual existence.
Sure.
Maybe your personal AI. So, maybe you already, co-piloted Brian. This
is actually, I've been taking a nap this whole time. This is my AI.
Oh, very good.
But so it's I'm on Bbenz, BBENZ on Twitter, on Threads, on Mastodon, on GitHub, and also you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Brian Benz LinkedIn, and my profile's there as well. But BBENZ is the place, the ID I use in most places.
Perfect. And next chat we should have is about Java and AI. What Microsoft does to connect both. This will be interesting. If you have something,
I would love to do that. Absolutely. That'd be cool.
So thank you.
All right. Well, thanks. That was good. It was a great conversation again. As always. Thank you.